You push through the doors. The piano player hits a dramatic chord. Everyone stops and stares. The bartender slides a bottle of whiskey down the polished bar. A cowboy tips his hat. Someone's about to draw. That's the saloon, you know. The one from every Western movie ever made. Now forget all of it. The real Wild West saloon wasn't romantic. It wasn't clean. It wasn't even particularly fun. It was a cramped, stinking trap designed to separate desperate men from their money as quickly as possible. Most of what you think you know about saloons comes from Hollywood. The doors were wrong, the drinks were poison, the gambling was rigged, the violence was uglier, and the whole operation existed for one purpose: exploitation. So let's walk into a real frontier saloon, not the movie version, the actual one, where the smell hit you 20 feet away, where sitting in the wrong spot could get you killed. Starting with those doors you just pictured. You see them in every Western. Those iconic bat-wing doors. A lone gunslinger pushes through, and they swing back and forth behind him, creaking in the wind. The camera loves that shot, the silhouette framed perfectly against the dusty street, boots hitting the wooden floor with authority. It's the moment you know you're in a saloon. Except most saloons didn't have them. Walk into an actual frontier saloon and you'd find a regular door, solid wood, hinges, a handle, boring, practical. Some places just had canvas flaps, others had nothing at all. Just an open doorway with flies buzzing in and out. Why? Because saloon owners weren't idiots. Swinging doors let out heat in winter. They let in dust storms in summer. They let in cold, flies, and anything else the wind carried. And heat cost money. Firewood wasn't free. No owner was going to pay for warmth just so it could escape through decorative doors that looked good in the movies 100 years later. The few saloons that did use batwing doors had specific reasons. Hot climates needed ventilation. Bartenders wanted to see trouble coming from the street before it walked in. But even those doors weren't the waist-high, perfectly balanced Hollywood versions. They were crude, often broken, and they came off completely during winter. So if the most iconic image of the Wild West saloon was a lie, what about the rest of it? Step inside, look around. What do you see? If you're picturing polished mahogany bars, ornate decor, and spacious rooms with high ceilings, you're still watching a movie. The real thing looked nothing like that. Picture instead a cramped box, 20 by 30 feet if you were lucky. Bare dirt floors or rough wooden planks that hadn't seen a nail in the right place. The walls? Unpainted. Sometimes just canvas stretched over frames. And the windows? There weren't any. Movies love those big saloon windows. Sunlight streaming through, illuminating the dust. Perfect for dramatic silhouettes and watching trouble ride into town. But real saloons kept windows to a minimum, or skipped them entirely. Windows let out heat. They let people see inside during raids or robberies. They were structural weak points. Why would you want them? The bar itself, that gleaming centerpiece of every Western, was usually just rough planks laid across whiskey barrels. Only the wealthiest town saloons had actual polished bars, and even those weren't mahogany. Dim light of oil lamps and candles. Speaking of light, forget chandeliers. Most saloons had a few oil lamps hanging from the ceiling, maybe some candles on tables. The whole place existed in permanent twilight, dark corners everywhere. You couldn't see faces clearly from across the room, which was sometimes the point. So you're standing in a dark, cramped box with dirt floors and canvas walls, already nothing like the movies. But you haven't noticed the worst part yet, the smell. You'd smell a frontier saloon from 20 feet away, in summer from 50. It wasn't just unpleasant, it was a physical assault. Unwashed bodies packed into a small space with no ventilation. Men who hadn't bathed in weeks, sometimes months. Layer on top of that the tobacco, not just smoke, but the spit. Spittoons lined the floors, but most men missed. Tobacco juice pooled in corners, soaked into the dirt, created a brown crust on the floorboards. Then add vomit. Drunk men don't always make it outside. Add urine. Same problem. Add gun smoke that hung in the air for hours. Add rotting food from whatever the saloon tried to pass off as a free lunch. Add the manure tracked in on boots. Mix it all together in a confined space with no airflow, and you get a stench that would make you gag before you cross the threshold. Cowboys who'd spent weeks on the trail sleeping next to cattle would walk into a saloon and think it smelled worse than the herd. But you'd get used to it. You had to, because this is where everything happened. Now here's something movies almost never show you. When you walked into that saloon, you didn't just walk in, not if you wanted to survive. Where you went, where you sat, who you stood near. Hollywood shows cowboys wandering in, sitting anywhere, ordering drinks without a care. That's a good way to get killed. Real saloons had unwritten rules, and breaking them started fights. First rule, never sit with your back to the door. Every regular knew this. The corner seats near exits belonged to men who'd been around long enough to claim them. If you took someone's usual spot, you'd know within seconds. They'd tell you to move. If you didn't, things escalated. Sitting near the poker tables when you weren't playing marked you as prey. Gamblers assumed you were watching their hands, planning to rob them or working with someone who was. Standing too close to the bar when it was crowded meant getting shoved, elbowed, or having drinks spilled on you, sometimes on purpose, just to start something. And if you sat near the spittoon, that meant you were low value. Someone who could be pushed around. New to town, weak. It was a signal, whether you meant it or not. The smart move was to stand near the bar with your back to the wall, close to an exit where you could see the whole room. That's what men who'd survived a few saloons did. But survival wasn't just about where you stood. It was about understanding what you were walking into. And what you were walking into was a death trap. Movies make saloon violence look common but manageable. A few fist fights, maybe a shooting, everyone ducks, life goes on. The reality was grimmer. People died in saloons. The numbers varied wildly depending on the town. Dodge City, famous as one of the deadliest places in the West, saw about 5 saloon deaths per year during its worst period. That doesn't sound like much until you remember Dodge City's population was under 1,000 people. 5 deaths in a town that size is significant. But Dodge City was relatively civilized compared to mining boomtowns, places like Body, California, or Deadwood, South Dakota, during peak periods. Most of those happened in or near saloons. And here's the thing movies get completely wrong. Most of those deaths weren't from dramatic gunfights. They were from stabbings, from men falling down drunk and cracking their skulls, from disease spreading through cramped, filthy spaces, from accidents, guns going off when someone stumbled, knives slipping during arguments that weren't even serious. The violence was constant, but it was ugly and stupid, not heroic. Now, there's one thing movies do show accurately, and it's worth mentioning because it's rare. Saloons were segregated, heavily. Movies today sometimes show diverse groups drinking together, everyone equal under the whiskey-stained roof. That's fantasy. Real frontier saloons divided people by race and class, and those divisions were enforced violently. Some saloons had separate rooms for Mexican customers, others banned them entirely. Chinese minors were prohibited in most establishments. Black cowboys, and there were thousands of them, were often forced to use side or back entrances. Many towns had designated colored saloons. If a black man walked into a white saloon, he'd be thrown out. If he resisted, he'd be beaten or killed. Native Americans were legally banned from purchasing alcohol in most territories. The laws were federal. If a saloon owner sold to a Native American, he could lose his license and face prosecution. Women only entered saloons if they worked there. Respectable women avoided them entirely. The women who did work there, we'll get to them later, occupied a specific, controlled space within the social hierarchy. Class mattered too. Miners didn't drink with ranchers. Cowboys avoided gentlemen's clubs where businessmen gathered. Each group had their territory, and crossing those lines caused problems. So you're standing in this cramped, stinking, segregated box trying not to sit in the wrong spot or offend the wrong person. Now you need a drink. You walk up to the bar. The bartender looks at you. You order whiskey. He pours it. You drink it. Because what you just drank wasn't whiskey. Not real whiskey. It was rot gut. And the name was literal. That drink was rotting your stomach lining with every swallow. Movies show rough whiskey. Cowboys grimace, slam the glass down, order another. It looks harsh but drinkable. The reality was closer to poison. Real aged whiskey existed, but it was expensive and rare. What most saloons served was grain alcohol mixed with whatever made it look and taste like whiskey without actually being whiskey. The recipe varied, but common ingredients included burnt sugar for color, tobacco juice for bite, turpentine for that burning sensation, and sometimes gunpowder or strychnine for an extra kick. In small doses, it created a tingling sensation that drinkers associated with strong alcohol. This mixture earned names like rotgut, tarantula juice, coffin varnish, and tanglefoot. Men drank it anyway because it was cheap, and it got them drunk. The long-term effects, liver damage, stomach ulcers, addiction, poisoning, weren't concerns when you might get stabbed tomorrow. Beer wasn't much better. Warm, flat, often contaminated with bacteria. No refrigeration meant beer sat in barrels for weeks. It soured. It grew things. You drank it anyway. But here's what movies miss about drinking in saloons. The bartender wasn't just serving you. He was controlling you. The man behind that bar was the most powerful person in the room, and most customers didn't even realize it. Movies show bartenders as servants. They pour drinks, wipe glasses, maybe break up a fight. That's not even close to the reality. The bartender was a banker. He held gold dust for miners, settled debts between customers, extended credit, and decided who could run a tab and who paid cash. In mining towns, bartenders kept scales behind the bar to weigh gold dust for payment. And here's the trick: those scales were often rigged, or the bartender had greasy fingers that picked up extra gold dust when he handled it. He was an information broker. The bartender knew everyone's business: who was in town, who was leaving, who had money, who had enemies, who was cheating on his wife, who was planning a robbery. That information had value. Lawmen paid for it. Outlaws paid for it. The bartender sold to whoever paid more. He was a weapons holder. In towns that banned guns inside saloons, customers checked their weapons with the bartender. He decided when you got them back. He also kept a shotgun under the bar, and he knew how to use it. Bartenders killed more troublemakers than sheriffs did. He was a mediator. When arguments started, the bartender often stepped in before they became fights. Not out of kindness. Violence was bad for business. Broken furniture cost money. Dead customers didn't buy drinks. The bartender's job was keeping things profitable, and that meant controlling the chaos. And he could ban you. Get on the bartender's bad side and you were done. Not just in that saloon, bartenders talked to each other. Get banned from one place, and word spread. In a small town, that was social death. So when you ordered that rotgut whiskey, you weren't just buying a drink. You were entering a relationship with the most dangerous man in the room. Now you've got your drink. You've found a safe spot to stand. You're trying not to breathe through your nose because of the smell. What do? If you're like most men, you gamble. Because gambling was everywhere. This is one thing movies actually get right. Poker tables, faro layouts, dice games. Saloons were gambling halls first and drinking establishments second. The alcohol was just there to loosen judgment and keep players at the tables longer. But here's what movies don't show. Every single game was rigged. Not some games, not most games, every game. If you sat down at a poker table in a frontier saloon, you were about to be cheated. The only question was how. Marked cards were standard. Tiny marks on the backs, visible only to dealers who knew what to look for. Shaved dice that favored certain numbers. Dealers who worked together, signaling each other about players' hands. House players, who pretended to be regular customers but actually worked for the saloon, steering money toward the house. Bottom dealing, pulling cards from the bottom of the deck instead of the top, was an art form. Good dealers could do it invisibly. Hold-out devices, spring-loaded mechanisms, hidden up sleeves that dispensed cards on demand were common among professional gamblers. If you won big, you were either cheating better than everyone else, or you were about to be robbed. Sometimes both. The saloon's cut came from every pot. The house took a percentage, and that percentage wasn't negotiable. But the real money came from the cheating. A good dealer could strip a table of players in an hour and make it look like bad luck. And when someone figured it out, that's when things got violent. You're sitting at a poker table. You've been losing for an hour. Your money's almost gone. Then you see it, a marked card, a bottom deal, something obvious. You call it out. The table goes quiet. The dealer denies it. You insist. Other players are watching. Some of them knew the game was rigged. They were in on it. Others are just as angry as you. The tension spikes. This is the moment movies love. The dramatic accusation. The slow reach for a gun. The standoff. Here's what actually happened. Someone pulled a knife and stabbed you. No warning. No step outside and no countdown. Just sudden close quarters violence. Tables flipped. Chairs flew. Other players scattered or joined in. Most poker deaths were stabbings, not shootings, because knives worked better in tight spaces. If guns came out, they came out fast and messy. 3 feet away, multiple shots. Terrible accuracy because everyone was panicking. Bystanders got hit. The room filled with smoke. People trampled each other trying to reach the exits. It was over in 30 seconds. Someone was bleeding on the floor. Someone else was running. The bartender was yelling about the broken furniture, and you were either dead, wounded, or trying to figure out how to get out before the law showed up. This is the reality of saloon violence. Not choreographed, not heroic, just brutal and stupid and over before you understood what happened. But let's say you survived the poker game. You're still standing. You've still got some money. You're feeling lucky. Then someone bumps into you, spills your drink, doesn't apologize. Now you're in a brawl. Movies love saloon brawls, the choreographed chaos. Chairs breaking over backs, men flying through windows, the piano player ducking, bodies everywhere. It looks fun, almost cartoonish. Real brawls were short, vicious, and left people permanently damaged. First, chairs didn't break. They were solid wood, expensive. Hit someone with a chair, and the chair stayed intact. The person didn't. Furniture damage came out of everyone's tab, so breaking things made you enemies even among people who weren't fighting. Second, there were no rules. Biting, eye gouging, groin kicks, hair pulling, anything that worked. Men fought to win, not to look tough. If you went down, boots started kicking. Ribs broke. Skulls cracked. Third, brawls lasted maybe 90 seconds. That's how long it took for someone to get knocked unconscious, for the bartender to end it with a shotgun blast into the ceiling, or for everyone to get too tired to continue. The movie version where fights go on for 5 minutes? Fantasy. Real fights were exhausting. 30 seconds of actual combat and you were gasping for air. Bystanders got hit constantly. You could be standing at the bar, minding your business, and catch a fist meant for someone else, or get knocked down and trampled. Saloon brawls injured more innocent people than participants. And through all of this, you know what didn't happen? The piano player didn't keep playing. Movies love this image. The piano player, dedicated to his craft, continues playing through the chaos. Sometimes the music stops dramatically when guns are drawn. It's a great cinematic moment. It's also completely wrong. The second fist started flying, musicians stopped and hid. Why? Because pianos cost as much as a house. A good piano in a frontier town could run $500 to $1,000, more than most men earned in a year. Saloon owners protected those pianos like they were made of gold. If you got near the piano during a fight, the owner would shoot you himself. Musicians knew this. They stopped playing, moved away from the instrument, and waited for things to calm down. Some tried playing during arguments, hoping music would diffuse tension. But the moment violence started, the music stopped. This wasn't cowardice, it was economics. Pianos were investments. Replacements took months to arrive. No owner risked that for atmosphere. But let's say the brawl ends. You're bruised but alive. The room settles. Men go back to drinking. The bartender starts cleaning up. You think the worst is over, then someone walks in with a gun, and you realize the worst is just starting. Gunfights inside saloons were rare. Much rarer than movies suggest. Most towns banned guns inside drinking establishments for exactly this reason. Customers checked their weapons at the door or left them at their hotels. But rare doesn't mean never. And when gunfights happened inside saloons, they were nothing like the movies. No dramatic countdowns, no facing each other at opposite ends of the room, no quick draw contests, just someone pulling a gun and firing at close range, 3 to 10 feet away, multiple shots, smoke filling the room instantly, panic, accuracy was terrible. Even experienced shooters missed at point-blank range when adrenaline hit. One documented gunfight in a saloon involved 2 men firing 17 shots at each other from across a poker table. Total hits, 3. Both men survived. When bullets did connect, people didn't fly backward like in movies. They dropped, or stumbled, or kept moving for several seconds before realizing they'd been shot. Gut shots meant slow, agonizing deaths over hours or days. Chest shots drowned you in your own blood. Head shots were rare, hard targets, especially in dim light and chaos. Bystanders got hit more often than intended targets. Bullets went through walls, ricocheted off metal fixtures, hit people standing outside. One saloon shooting in Tombstone killed a man walking past on the street. He never even knew there was a fight. The famous showdowns didn't exist. Shootings were ambushes. Someone walked in specifically to kill someone else, or an argument escalated and someone pulled a gun before the other person was ready, or a drunk fired randomly and hit whoever was unlucky. After the shooting, the room cleared in seconds. Nobody wanted to be there when the law arrived. Bodies were left where they fell. The bartender dealt with cleanup. Again, so you've survived the drinking, the gambling, the cheating, the brawl, and the gunfight. You're still standing. You feel like you've beaten the odds. Then you check your pockets and realize you're broke. Because here's the thing movies never explain. Saloons were designed to strip you of every cent you had, and they were very good at it. A shot of whiskey cost 25 cents. That doesn't sound like much until you remember that a cowboy earned about $30 per month. 25 cents was half a day's wages. Most men didn't have one drink. They had 10, 15, 20. Beer cost 10 to 15 cents. Poker buy-ins started at $5 minimum. Food, if the saloon served it, cost 50 cents for something barely edible. Prostitutes charged $2 to $5. Add it all up and a single night out cost $5 to $10. A third of a month's salary. Cowboys who came to town after months on the trail would blow their entire earnings in 48 hours. Then they'd be broke, hungover, and facing another 3 months of work to do it again. This wasn't accidental. Saloons were traps. The whole system was designed to create a cycle. Work, get paid, spend everything, go back to work. Saloon owners got rich. Customers stayed poor. The drinks were cheap to make but expensive to buy. The gambling was rigged. The entertainment was overpriced. Credit was available but came with interest. Men went into debt, worked it off, and repeated the cycle until they died or got too old to work. Some men understood this and stayed away. Most didn't or couldn't. Because saloons weren't just about drinking and gambling, they were the only social spaces in most frontier towns. The only places to see people, hear news, feel like you were part of something. Loneliness drove men to saloons as much as alcohol did, and when the sun came up, when the last drunk stumbled out and the doors finally closed, what was left? Movies never show you this part. The morning after. But it's the most honest picture of what saloons really were. The floor was covered in tobacco spit, vomit, blood, and broken glass. Bodies, men who'd passed out drunk, were scattered around like discarded furniture. Most were still breathing, some weren't. The bartender or owner would check, drag the living ones outside, and deal with the dead ones depending on whether anyone cared enough to claim them. The smell, already bad, was now 10 times worse. Everything from the night before had concentrated overnight. Vomit had soaked into the floorboards. Blood had dried in sticky pools. The air was thick with the residue of tobacco smoke, gun smoke, and human misery. Broken furniture was itemized. The bartender kept a list of who'd caused what damage. Those men would be charged when they came back, assuming they came back. Some skipped town to avoid paying. Others paid and broke more furniture the next week. The cleanup took hours. Sweeping, mopping, scrubbing, replacing broken glass, airing out the space as much as possible, which wasn't much. By evening, the saloon would open again, and the whole cycle would repeat. This was the reality of Wild West saloons, not the glamorous, exciting places movies show you, not temples of frontier freedom or stages for heroic showdowns, just cramped, filthy, exploitative businesses that extracted money from desperate, lonely men and gave them nothing but hangovers, debt, and the occasional knife wound in return. So could you handle a real Wild West saloon? If you made it this far and still think yes, you're either braver or more foolish than most. Either way, you'd fit right in.